Hey everybody, and welcome back to Flood to Pitson for the win, or the Hall of the Very Good. We're going to start a new series that we're going to call. I'm a big Montreal Expos collector, trying to collect every team set of every year that they were in existence, and every card company that put out any cards of them. And so I thought we would look at a season and just go over the season. And what you're looking at is the 1971 cards, but we're going to talk about the 1970 season, because it was the following year where the cards would come out based off the season before, and the players would all match up with the season before. So we're going to look at the 1970, which would be the Montreal Expos' second season. As you know, they were an expansion team in 1969, along with the San Diego Padres, the Kansas City Royals, and the Kansas City, San Diego, and Seattle Pilots. And in their first year, they were really bad. They were 52 and 111. But in their second year, Gene Mauch was the manager. They finished last, but basically the identical record of Philadelphia, except for one more loss. They were 73 and 69. They finished sixth in the NL. They played at Jerry Park, which was this park outdoors. It was a pretty good park for just getting it done really quick. They had I think less than 8 months to get the park ready for the first season. And we'll just look at the players from there. Here's the team picture. And the manager was Gene Mauch, who would end up being the manager for, I want to say 5 or 6 years, but he really did a pretty good job winning. You know, when you go from 52 to 73 wins, that's a pretty good, it's a 21 win increase. And, but we'll start off with just talking about the lineup. It started off with, leading off was Gary Sutherland playing second base. And batting second was Rusty Staub, who would end up becoming literally the best player on the team for a number of years. Gary Sutherland had a minus 1.0 WAR, got into 116 games, batted 206 with 3 homers and 26 RBIs. Was a pretty solid second baseman. When he wasn't in there, they would move Marv Stahl in there, who played in 100 games himself, because Stahl could play third, short, and second. But for the most part, Gary Sutherland was the second baseman, and for a lot of the season was the leadoff hitter, which is ironic because he wasn't a great hitter. Rusty Staub, on the other hand, was the best player on the team. In 1970, he played in 160 games, batted 274, which was second on the team to Ron Fairley's 288, and actually third. Bob Bailey batted 287. But he led the team in home runs with 30 and RBIs with 94, and with stolen bases with 12. Had 23 doubles, 7 triples, had 156 hits, led the team in runs scored with 98. He was literally the offense and was the best player. Ended up having a really nice career, playing for a number of teams. Started off with Houston, went to Montreal. From Montreal, went to New York. Had a nice career with New York too, and a few other teams. He was a really solid player, and really, when you look at his overall numbers, I wouldn't say he's a Hall of Famer, but he sure did put up really good numbers, well over 2,000 hits, and just had a nice career. But that's your leadoff, and Staub played right field. Gary Sutherland was a second baseman. Batting third was Ron Fairley playing first base, and he split time with Bob Bailey. Mac Jones was your cleanup hitter for most of the year, playing left field. Ron Fairley got into 119 games, had 15 homers, 61 RBIs, batted 288, led the team, or second on the team, with on-base percentage of 402, which is outstanding. He was had a really good eye. He walked more than he struck out. He had 72 walks, struck out 64 times, which is pretty good. And if you can believe this, was second on the team in stolen bases with 10. Didn't really have a lot of speed merchants on the team when your right fielder and first baseman are your leading stolen base guys. And get this, your third guy in steals was your catcher, John Bateman. So that's what was pretty amazing. Batting, Mac Jones was a pretty good cleanup hitter. He had 14 homers, but he only had 32 RBIs, batted 240 with a high on-base percentage of 398. Another guy who didn't strike out much they had no one with more than Rusty Staub had the most strikeouts with 93, but he also had 112 walks. Mac Jones had a 2.6 WAR. Ron Fairley had a 4.1 WAR. Rusty Staub had the highest at 6.3. And so Mac Jones ended up being a pretty solid player. He was a crowd favorite along with Rusty Staub, but he would hit more home runs the following year, but this year, 14 for 32. So there was third and fourth. Batting fifth was Coco LeBoy. I call him Jose Coco LeBoy, who was had a solid season. He actually played really good third base. He was actually known for his glove. Would end up being a pretty good hitter the next couple of years, but in 1970, he had 5 homers and 53 RBIs, quite a few RBIs. On only 86 hits, had 26 doubles, but only batted 199. He was basically either hitting a homer or a double. Had an on-base percentage of 254, struck out 81 times. Batting sixth was Mac Jones. Adolphe Phillips. He was a center fielder who split time in the outfield with Jim Gossiger, and but for the start of the season he was a starting center fielder, but he ended up getting hurt. He had a 1.5 WAR with 6 homers and 21 RBI, 7 steals, 238 average, but a pretty good on base percentage of 352. There were times that Adolphe would go up and back leadoff, but not much. Jim Gossiger, here's his card, played along with him. They split time in center field, and Gossiger would end up with a 1.5 WAR. He got more plate appearances than Phillips, 274, had 11 doubles, 5 homers, 37 RBIs, batted 263, and was a pretty good glove guy. They both were actually pretty good at playing the position. Batting seventh was the catcher John Bateman, and batting eighth was one of the worst hitting shortstops of the 70s, Bobby Wine. John Bateman would have a 1.8 WAR for the year. He'd have 21 doubles, 15 homers, 68 RBIs. At the age of 29, had a 237 batting average, and like I said, was third on the team in stolen bases with 8. Again, really solid players. Him and John Bacabella would split the time. Where's my John Bacabella? There he is, right here. They would split time at catcher. John Bacabella was the starter the year before. Got into 61 games, had 5 homers, 17 RBIs with a 269 average. And, they made a pretty good tandem. The pitching staff said they enjoyed pitching to both these guys. They both could call a pretty good game. Bobby Wine, on the other hand, he batted 232, and I think it's probably one of his best batting averages of his career. He played 159 games. He was basically the starting shortstop every game, 501 at-bats, had an 0.2 WAR, had 21 doubles, 3 triples, 3 homers, 51 RBIs, which isn't bad considering he was batting 8th, and just a solid player, a really good glove man up the middle. Defensively, they were in the middle of the pack in the National League that year, and but some of the guy, Ron Brandt, came off the bench, and he was the third catcher, but also played a number of infield positions, and he could play third, and kind of a utility guy. Brand would get into 140 at bats, get into 72 games, no homers, 9 RBIs, about a 238, but a solid player. Bob Bailey was really the star off the bench. Really should have been considered a starter. He played first and third and left field. He got into 131 games, had 28 homers, 84 RBIs, about a 287 with a 407 on base percentage. Had a 4.4 WAR, which was second best on the team with Ron Fairley third. So a really solid bench guy that literally could come in and play. He played pretty much every day, just didn't play the same position. Now we'll move on and look a little bit at the pitching staff. Ended up being better. When you increase by 21 wins, the number one starter was on opening day was Bill Stoneman, but the number one starter was Carl Morton, coming off a really good, solid season. He was 18-11 in 1970 with a 3.60 ERA. Started 37 games, completed 10, 4 shutouts, pitched 284 innings, had 154 strikeouts. He walked a lot, 124, but had a 4.1 WAR. Was literally the glue of that pitching staff. No one had a WAR above 1 on the starting staff. That's how bad the staff was. Steve Wrinkle would come in the second position and pitching really his rookie season. He was 13-11, had a 4.32 ERA, started 33 games, had 7 complete games, 1 shutout, 222 innings, had 142 strikeouts, walked a little bit over 100. That was one of the things that came back to haunt them, was they did walk quite a few. The whole pitching staff was, they only struck out 914, but they walked 716. That's not a good ratio you want to have. Their whip was 1.5. You want to keep your whip right around 1.1. Whip is hits and walks combined per 9 innings. That's how you get that, for anybody who wanted to know. The third pitcher was Bill Stoneman. Where's my Bill Stoneman? Oh, where's Bill Stoneman? There he is. That was the third pitcher, and Mike Wegener was the 4th starter. There was a number of guys that would get starts on the team, but that's basically it. They had a 4-man rotation, which is what most rotations were back in the early 70s. Bill Stoneman got into 30 games as a starter, 40 overall. All the starters pitched in relief in a number of games. Steve Wrinkle had 9 relief appearances, and Carl Morton had 6. So Stoneman started 30 games, was 7-15 with a 4.59 ERA, 5 complete games, 3 shutouts, had over 200 innings pitched, 176 strikeouts, led the team in strikeouts, 109 walks, was 26 years old, was really pretty solid. Mike Wegner was the youngest of the group of starters. He was 23. He started 16 games, had a 5.26 ERA, was 3-6 with 1 complete game, got 104 innings pitched. Along with him, Joe Sparma, Gary Wazowski, John O'Donnell, Baylor Moore, and Rich Nye all started games. They started about 20 games between them. The most was 6 with Nye and Sparma. Both of them had ERAs, one at 7, one at 4. There was no one with an ERA on the relief staff or on that starting staff in that 4 spot that was under 4. They were just pretty bad. They were in a lot of the games. They were solid. They were a competitive team considering how bad they were their first year. Their front line was Claude Raymond was the closer, and Howie Reed would come in as kind of the setup guy, and Dan McGinn was like the long guy, the long reliever. Claude Raymond had a 4.43 ERA. He finished 43 games, had 23 saves. He was basically the closer on the team. 76 hits in 83 innings pitched, 68 strikeouts, 27 walks, so a 1.2 whip, which is really solid. Dan McGinn had a high ERA. He pitched the most innings out of relief. He was the long reliever, they would call him, 130 innings pitched. Actually started 19 games, finished 12. He was their emergency starter, or like their 5th starter when they did go to a 5th starter. He was 7-10 on the year with a 5.44 ERA. Howie Reed had the best ERA of the relievers. He was 3.13 with 20 games finished. He had 57 games. He was 6-5, had 5 saves, pitched 89 innings, 42 strikeouts, but 40 walks. Again, not a strong 2-to-1 ratio is what you're looking for. 1.3 whip. But again, a solid team. John Strohmeyer and Mike Marshall. Mike Marshall was a young guy on the team who'd end up becoming a really good reliever for the Dodgers down the line, and in the next couple of years would become a really good reliever. And when we talk about some of the other years of the Expos coming up, we'll talk a lot about Mike Marshall. John Strohmeyer was 3-1 with a 4.86 ERA. Mike Marshall was 3-7 with 3 saves and a 3.48 ERA. overall, solid team. They finished, like I said, out of this 7-team National League East, Pittsburgh won it that year, 89 and 73. Chicago Cubs finished 5 games out, and the Mets were 6 games out after coming off their World Series year in 69. The St. Louis Cardinals were 13 back. Philadelphia was 15 and a half back. And Montreal was 16 back. At home, they were 39 and 41, which is pretty good for a team that finished dead last. They had a better home record than even the St. Louis Cardinals, who were 34 and 47. But on the road, they were 34 and 48. Again, Gene Mauch was the manager, did a pretty good job. Scouting director was Mel Didier. The farm director was Danny Medendez. Again, really solid, team. This would be only their second year in the league. And one of my favorite teams, because I just like that year. I've collected all the years of the Expos up through 2004, which was the last year that they were in Montreal. I think there were some 2005 sets that they put out, and we'll be looking at a lot of them. But this was a look at the 1970 season, but through the 1971 cards. And that's kind of how I'll always do it, is we'll look at the cards of the year after, just because that'll have the players that were on the team. When I looked at the 1970 cards, quite a few of the starters, they didn't have a card for 1970 on the Expos. So that's a look at the 1970 Expos. Join me every week. We're going to do this on Sunday, and I'll put these videos out on Monday where we take a look at an Expos season. So thank you for joining me for the first installment of a history of the Montreal Expos. And we'll talk again. Subscribe. Please like and comment. Let me know what you think, and we'll talk more about the Montreal Expos next week.